Hello, welcome to Panhandle Primate Presents. I am your host, Dexter Kearley. I am joined by my co-host and homeboy, Trent Peterson.
Yep.
And today's episode is called A Different Type of Tech. So, Trent,
Yep.
of the Broken Road podcast and project, you've been putting out some good episodes. People can go over there and check you out. Hopefully, I need to put like right here a link to your channel.
Yeah, that would be great.
That's what I'll try to do. But definitely jump over there and check that out. If you're wanting to support the Panhandle Primate podcast, then go look at the Broken Road project, because that is probably money better spent, and it's going to go to helping people get better, and that's kind of what my overall goal. I think, if at the end of my life, if people can say nothing else, then Dexter helped other people get better, I will consider that a win.
You know, that's when I talked to Corey yesterday, that's what we were talking about, goals, life goals. Sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, I mean, who can come? I mean, you're going to mess up throughout the span of your life,
Absolutely.
But if your overall goal is just to help other people, feel better, be better, be able to have a little bit more agency in their own life, then I feel like that's at least a noble cause.
It's very rewarding, and we can always use the help. So
yeah. Panhandle. I was about to plug myself on my own podcast.
Yeah, plug yourself on your own podcast.
So Broken Road Project is the website.
Correct.
But if you're wanting to check out the fun episodes that have been popping lately, I feel like you've had a couple of pretty fun episodes, and I think that the next ones are probably going to continue to be better and inspiring, and also eye-opening and exhilarating. So go check out the Broken Road podcast for that one.
Right. And the actual website is thebrokenroad.org.
Okay, thebrokenroad.org.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And that's where we'll do our fundraising, things like that.
So check it out, and be sure to leave the world a little bit better than you found it. So today's episode is called A Different Type of Tech, and I'm going to try to present my paradigm, the way I kind of view some of this ancient history stuff, which leads to my perception of today. If you are interested in any of this stuff, then jump over on my website and you can follow along. I do have a blog post, but so that's a pretty decent looking website, considering that I have almost zero technical abilities. Squarespace seems to make it pretty easy, but if you'll scroll down a little bit here, so you can check out the podcast, the cultural blog, which is also just the thoughts from the farm. That's what we're going to be looking at today. And then if you will give my short stories a little read, none of them are super long, and that is one of the things that it's like something that I've always been, I feel like, particularly good at, that probably most people don't know about me. So I like to write stories and words.
And I think this is a great insight on who you are. It's really hard to kind of totally wrap your mind around Dexter Kearley. You get a lot of information off of the podcast, but there's a lot more to you than just this podcast.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Always an interesting, engaging conversation on and off camera.
That's what I go for. It's almost, I was trying to ask Shannon last night if it's a blessing or a curse. Like my brain. It's like, is it a blessing? Sometimes. Is it a curse? Probably most of the time.
I think it's just however you use it. You probably use your own. Yeah, that's fine.
That was a little hot.
Yeah.
Came in hot.
Just however you use it.
So if you'll scroll back up to the top there. So people, when you land on the website, if you'll click basically where Trent's head is, there's like 3 little lines, and then you can find thoughts from the farm. And this is where we are going to be landing and starting from today. So, if you will bear with me, I will read this little bit of an intro, and then we'll get into some pictures and I think some probably, fun discussions.
Oh, yeah.
So here we go. I was first introduced to the concept of the high water mark of civilization by Dan Carlin, host of the Hardcore History podcast. Carlin would weave the ebb and flow of civilizations into the accounts of the past to show that civilization frequently collapses from grandeur, and how within a few short generations, knowledge and techniques of the previous high can be completely lost. This illustrates humanity's ability to forget the past and become accustomed to the current standard of civilization as baseline. An example of this is growing up with the internet. To a digital native, the internet seems mundane or even harmful. But just 50 years ago, the internet and all the devices that it operates through were considered science fiction and were dreamed of for possible benefits to humanity. If society collapsed today due to global disaster, how long before the survivors would be looking at the technological remnants that we use so ubiquitously today as magical devices built by the gods?
I don't think it'd take very long.
So it's really interesting because you and I have had this discussion before. Whenever I talk about some of the conspiracy theories that I've paid attention to, like the Tartarian and the mud flood and the resets, and some of that stuff is a little bit more on the fringes of, thought, but I just like mythology in general. So I just like to pay attention to that stuff. But you and I've had multiple discussions where I'm like, well, how did they do that? It just doesn't make sense that they could have done that.
Right.
And then you talk about hanging out with, what was your great granddad? Your granddad.
Yeah, my granddad.
Your granddad. And you would be like, well, yeah, I mean, it seems impossible to us, but this dude could do stuff that seems impossible to me today. And I think of, there's a really good example of this with Coral Castle in Florida. Have you ever heard of that?
I haven't.
So it's a megalithic site that was built by one man out of coral, mined coral, and he built the entire site by himself. We need to look into that someday because it's super fascinating.
I'd like to see it, and I've seen a lot of guys that got time on their hands. I've seen them do some really cool things. Great craftsmanship, but you got to have a lot of time on your hands, and you have to have a goal. So I think that kind of starts going into some of the questions we'll probably go over today, I would imagine, is why and how.
Why and how. I think that is a big factor. I do want to point out this, I want to elaborate on this idea of the high water mark of civilization.
Okay.
What it would be is in the Amazon jungle, how they're finding all of these remnants of all these cities that are underneath the jungle.
Right, with the new mapping technology.
When we go and we look at those sites today, we're like, what were they doing? How were they doing this? What was the point? That is basically us looking back at a high water mark and having lost the knowledge and the techniques. Mm-hmm. So it's a perfect example. I mean, I guess that is the example, and Dan Carlin uses it in his episodes whenever he's talking about the ebbs and flows of the Roman imperial, network, and Greek and English empire, all of it. So anyway, let's continue. It is with this lens that I want to present a few sites and artifacts from around the world that I believe exemplify a lost technology that modern people lack a frame of reference to conceptualize. Our historical and religious institutions are quick to label everything as a tomb, a church, or propose some other ritualistic or symbolic meaning to the site. The individuals who constructed many of these ancient megalithic sites around the world are believed to have been driven by mythological or egotistical motivations. We are meant to believe that although these sites push the very limits of our technological understanding, both physically and logistically, The builders of the ancient past were slaves, illiterate, or freshly liberated from a subsist. I can never say that word.
Spit it out.
I can never say that word.
Spit it out, brother.
Subsistence,
Yeah,
hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Okay, let me say that again. Or freshly liberated from a subsistence, hunter-gatherer lifestyle who were motivated by god kings to build places of worship or burial that serve no practical purpose. And I think that's the part that I really want to emphasize. Most of these tombs, it's like, yeah, you build a tomb, you put a pharaoh in it, you lock it up, and it's just there. There's no practical purpose beyond the burial. And that just doesn't make sense to me for a lot of these sites, but we'll continue. We are told these sites were commissioned by megalomaniacal. I really like that word, by the way. Megalomaniacal, egotistical royalty with the intention to remind the world of their greatness after they had gone. This frames these marbles not as achievements of humanity or an attribute of human potential, but as an example of the worst aspects of the individual ego and an expression of false religious fervor, right? Most Egyptologists are not like saying, hey, I worship the Egyptian gods. They're saying these people had a false notion of reality and it exemplified itself in this religion, that we don't believe today.
Right.
The question of how and why these sites were built is still largely accepted as a mystery. Like even the archaeologists themselves will say, we don't know. We don't know how they built this. We don't, and these are the standard, there are standard narrative explanations that fall far short of plausibility when presented in fresh context. So that's kind of the intro for the episode.
Okay.
And I start off with this idea of, do you have an eye for it? One of the things that I think is funny, it's I know I've brought this up with you before, but when you were building the site for my house, right? You come out and you're meeting with me and Shannon, and we're sitting there like, oh, we want the house to like lay like this on the property, and we want it to be here, and want it to position like this or whatever. And you look at it and you're like, well, that's not going to happen. Like it's just not really possible for, I mean, if you had an unlimited budget, we can make anything happen, right?
Correct.
But hey, within the confines of our reality, that's not an option, right? The best option is this. And you tell me, because you're a dirt guy and you're looking at dirt as a dirt guy looks at dirt, and I'm looking at dirt as a layman looks at the same dirt, right? So right. I don't have an eye for it. And then, so you're explaining to me, no, the house has to sit like this. It has to look like, it's going to have to look like this. It's going to be in this spot, just because that's just going to be how it is. And you're the professional and I'm the layman. So I relinquish, right? I'm like, okay, well, you're right. You're the one doing it.
You did. I don't know if Shannon jumped on board right there. I think it took a couple times, or I don't know. One of the two.
Shannon doesn't jump on board ever with anything. She's a give me a little bit. I've got to process it. We're gonna talk about it. I'm gonna think about it. I'm gonna look at it, and then maybe reluctantly I will agree to follow.
That's a hard conversation to have with anybody. Nobody really jumps on board when you tell them, "Hey, by the way, you're not going to do what you think you want to do." I'm sorry. I'm a dream crusher for you.
Well,
right
nobody wants to accept limitations, right? But now imagine that I was a pharaoh.
Yeah.
And I went to somebody and I said, "Hey, I want to build the largest stone structure in the world. Mm-hmm. And I want to build it right there." And you say, "Well, I don't know if that's going to..."
Oh, we're doing it.
Yeah. Oh, we're doing it. We're doing it. We're going to build it. And you're going to take all these slaves and you're going to build this. It's like, anyway, so all that to say, do you have an eye for it? Most of the time you don't. Like, people have opinions on stuff, and they don't understand the fact that they do not know what they're looking at. They don't know what they're seeing, and you need a professional to explain to you what you're seeing, right?
Right. What
you think or what you believe is not valid. A lot of people don't like to accept that your opinion doesn't matter, but there's a lot of people whose opinion doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. So Arthur C. Clarke was pivotal in the construction of the modern view of science fiction and popular culture. Clarke is well known for his role in writing 2001: A Space Odyssey and was a proponent of space travel throughout the 20th century. There's a decent chance that this guy was a psyop because he was pretty tightly working with Stanley Kubrick, and there's a good chance that he knew more than he was letting on, right?
Okay.
He came up with a list of 3 laws which have served to help conceptualize the modern view of technology. So, Arthur C. Clarke's 3 laws. 1. When a distinguished but elderly scientist states that something is possible, he is almost certainly right. When he states that something is impossible, he is very probably wrong. That's an interesting one. Number 2, the only way of discovering the limits of what is possible is to venture a little ways past them into the impossible, right? The only way to really discover what is possible is by failure. You have to be pushing past what is possible, failing a lot.
Oh, absolutely. That makes more sense to me.
And then this is the big one. Number 3, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Yeah, cool.
Which, I mean, if you think about a cell phone, we are so flippant about iPads and, tablets and cell phones that we completely neglect how incredible they genuinely are.
Well, and I think that's an age thing too. I mean, for me, I was in my senior year, I think, when Windows 95 came out. So I'm telling myself I'm my age, but
my boy's old.
There weren't any cell phones. We still used pagers and payphones. So
wow.
But I still find myself from time to time forgetting how powerful that is in the palm of your hand there.
Well, and even the pagers and cell phone or pagers and payphones. Like if you really think about it, in the vast scale of human existence, that is incredible.
Right.
It just pales in comparison to where we're at, technologically today.
No, it does, and I feel like if you didn't, your generation specifically, and even more like our sons' generations, they're growing up with this technology. So to them, it's no different than picking up, I guess you could say, like a book and reading it. I don't even know how to compare how plain the technology is to them because they've had it their whole life.
Yeah, it's just baseline.
Right.
Like baseline is that I can watch anything I want to watch when I want to watch it.
Immediate gratification.
Most of the time without ads even.
Right.
Right. It's kind of a wild to compare. But okay, so Clarke's 3rd law is most often referred to by modern researchers when presenting the argument that the magical, quote unquote, ability of the mythologized past might have just been advanced tech from a forgotten or erased civilization. It is in this context that we can begin to question the standard narrative that was developed by accredited, quote-unquote, archaeologists and seeks to reimagine the purposes.
No, you got reimagine the purposes.
So I am dyslexic. So sometimes even whenever I write a word, I can't read it. It's kind of ridiculous.
But you wrote it properly.
Yeah.
You're just not reading it right.
Right. So reimagine the purposes. Did it again.
Yeah, let me help you here.
Yeah.
Purposes.
And seeks, I feel like I'm back in the 1st grade again. So, they're like, Dexter, just read the word. I'm like, dude, I cannot read. I don't know.
It makes me feel better about myself when you're doing that. So.
Reimagine the purposes of some of Earth's most iconic and little understood archaeological sites.
Okay.
So we will jump into some of these pictures because they're absolutely crazy. So unexplained construction techniques. So the unfinished obelisk in Aswan Quarry in Egypt has baffled onlookers since its discovery in the 1920s. This obelisk was finished and when finished, would have measured around 41.75 meters or 137 feet and would have weighed nearly 1,090 tons. The mainstream narrative of how the Egyptians quarried the stone was by lighting fires on the surface and pouring water on the hot rocks, causing the fracture lines, or by drilling holes and placing wood into the holes and then soaking the wood, and as the wood would swell, causing breaks and cracks, and then that's what they would use those cracks, and using diorite pounding stones to break and shape the rock. Although these are just theories, we'll get to it in just a second. There are also theories about how these were transported, with the leading theories involving manpower and rolling the stones on logs and possibly using the same diorite pounding stones as like bearings underneath it to roll it. Alternative theories propose everything from stone softening with acid and to some sort of unknown or ununderstood machinery to like maybe grind it. The problem is they haven't really been able to find any remnants. So like if you were grinding it with metal, you would find little shards of metal in the rock.
Right. Well, and it seems strange to me that there's not even, if they were able to do this, then obviously they were able to most likely write at this point and communicate that way.
You would think there had to been some sort of a technical language to communicate with.
That would explain more of how they did this. But that's
almost like boring documents. Like
Yeah.
you'd expect some boring documents of like Trent ordering materials.
Right.
Just like straight up like, hey, I need like 12 more vats of hydrochloric acid. I need 15 more laborers, and Charlie went to the ER with a broken foot.
Yeah, even if it was on a stone tablet.
Yeah, that's the question, right? Is depending on the dating of these sites, it's less likely that stuff would have survived other than stone.
Right.
Let's see, where are we at? Okay, and so also here you can flash over to us being big for a second. We'll just chit chat, because how preposterous if I were to say to you, hey Trent, we're going to take the wheels off of your motor grader, right? And we're going to put that motor grader on a sled, and we're going to pull it from your house to my house, which is what, like 2 miles?
Right.
Maybe like 2 miles. And the only way we're going to move it is with ropes, diorite pounding stones, or wooden logs, and people pulling it. Right? How crazy would that be? Like, how long do you think that would take us, even with paved roads?
I was thinking about that as you were reading it. So, yes, the paved roads is kind of where I wanted to hit at on that. When you talked about moving things with the stones, I see that as being a very feasible, and I have actually used those techniques and been shown those techniques to move some things with smaller ball bearings and stuff like that, moving large objects, heavy objects. But that's on a smooth surface. So that's where I feel like that theory starts getting really shaky. We're talking about a very smooth surface for that to work. You're not pulling that structure or that motor grader up that road in the dirt.
Well, and you'd have to say smooth and hard, correct?
Yes,
like it would
hard,
have to be
yes.
a very dense material to where it doesn't deform under the weight of the stone that you're transporting.
Even if you have enough of those stones to displace the weight over a large area, you are still looking at needing a hard surface for that to really pan out. That's a pretty shaky theory in my opinion.
And now it would be interesting to imagine some sort of a track system, right?
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
if you were, but even the track system, it would still require like channels and
There would be a lot of craftsmanship that went into that, and then those would have to be moved as well.
And if you could do that, why can't you come up with a better way than rolling it on rocks?
Yeah, at
You
that
know,
point,
like
you would think the will would be already
you'd have some
involved.
sort of an understanding. Yeah, these people supposedly didn't even have the wheel. Is that correct? I don't know. I need to look that up. But I'm
That'd be
pretty.
interesting to see.
But
Yeah,
they're not proposing that they put them on wagons or
right.
trailers. So I imagine that they're in their story, the standard narrative story, they're probably not acknowledging that the wheel, that these people that can do some of these things, it's like, well, yeah, they couldn't figure out the wheel. They couldn't figure out that a round thing rolls.
Yeah, and I think once we start showing what these structures look like, it's really hard to believe that.
Okay, let's scroll. Let's go back to the website. So you did ask this when we were chit chatting about this at one point, how hard some of this stuff is.
Mm-hmm.
So the MOHS, I believe it's pronounced the Mohs scale, is used to define how hard / scratch resistant a material is.
Okay.
Copper, which is the tool that the dynastic Egyptians were said to have possessed, is a 3 on that scale.
Yeah, it's actually a little bit. It's not soft like brass, but it's not super hard either.
No, and with the diorite and granite ranking 6 to 7.
Yeah, that doesn't even make sense.
So not even close, right?
No.
And then the hardest thing, like, you know, one of the hardest things we have is diamonds.
Well, so like
And that's a
anything that
10.
I would use from a construction viewpoint now, anything I would use to cut rock with would be a diamond bit blade or a diamond
Moving how
grinding
fast?
type blade. I don't know the exact
Like
RPMs,
way
but yeah, I mean we're
crazy
talking about
RPMs.
jamming.
Yeah, jamming, working hard.
Yeah.
And you're gonna want the most blue collar dude back there just grinding on it.
Right.
Okay, so here as we scroll down, here's an example of some of the diorite pounding stones that these guys, these hunter gatherers, you know, these subsistence farmers were using to quarry this stone. If we scroll down a little bit more, you can see this is how they moved them. We have evidence, right? This is the evidence of exactly how they moved some of these structures. You see homeboy there at the front of the sled, you know, he's got a little pot.
Dude's a stud.
He's got a little pot of water and he's just dumping that water right in front of that sled and it's just sliding right along, right?
I mean, he does have a pretty good crew ahead of him.
Mm-hmm. Bunch of people, but anyway, this is one of the pictures. Whenever you ask about moving these objects, this is one of the pictures that the Egyptologist or whatever will point to and say, "Oh, this is how they moved them." We don't exactly know how the physics of this would work, but look, we've obviously got evidence that these guys were moving these stones this way, you know.
But we don't know how far they moved them. It's not saying that they didn't move them that way. And actually, a heavy enough stone with a smooth surface, and if it was on top of a really smooth surface, that probably would work with water. But it would have to be really smooth.
Really smooth,
Yeah.
right?
Which granite
can get.
Yeah, super smooth.
I mean,
but it is a little bit strange.
it's just kind of like you look at it and it's
Something
almost
happened there, though.
but
somebody took a lot of time to draw that or to do that.
Yeah,
back in the day.
Yeah, and then there's little hieroglyphics all over it. But I mean, it's interesting to me because do you notice the hieroglyphics at the very top of the page? How they have like an arc to them?
Oh, I see that.
It's weird. Like imagine if like I showed up to your house to do work on something. And like for instance today we had cabinets built or we got a bid on some cabinets. And the guy comes out and he measures everything and he says, "Okay, well, I'm going to send you an email with the CAD production of these cabinets, and that way you can see what it is exactly the plans that I'm wanting to, Now imagine if instead of him emailing me that digital file, he just gave me like a little napkin, and on the napkin he had drawn like, "Hey, see, here's a square, and here's my," it's like, which one am I more confident in? Well, which one has more capabilities?
I mean, to be honest, when I'm looking at it, it looks like what we would do when we had a set of plans already, and then we were going to red mark it and change something on it, or make a note for something that we were going to do later.
Interesting. So
like
what
handwriting on a set of already
almost
made notes.
Yes, that's a really good observation because that's what I was going to say is some of this stuff it to me, it seems like iterations, right? So like, imagine that maybe this papyri was already 200 years old, and somebody like pulls it out of a cabinet, and they're like, "What were they doing?" And they're making notes on it. You're right. That is almost what it seems like, you know?
That's what it looks like a
Yeah.
lot to me.
That's interesting. And so if you continue to scroll down, this is like a digital representation of how these loincloth covered barefoot men in sand.
That's not a good leader, by the way, that's sitting on the back of that.
Right.
I mean, it's like, what's he really doing?
Why are you even standing on it, bro? Get off.
Yeah. I mean, you're just adding to the weight. Why don't you get up in the front and lead?
Yeah. All he's missing is a whip.
Yeah.
Anyway, as we scroll down, we'll start to see some pictures of the unfinished obelisk. This is one of the first pictures that was taken of it. And you just see this guy like kind of standing up on the top of it, and this donkey, you know, and they're just kind of like, man, this looks like a quarried stone.
How old is that photo? Does it say?
I want to say it was from the 1800s,
okay.
but I should have made a better note. I didn't. Whenever I load these pictures, I'm loading them in galleries, and I need to, you know, that way I can't really put an individual note.
Yeah, that's just a question, not just looking at it.
Yeah, I think it was discovered in the 1920s, so that picture would have had to have been after that, I guess. But as you scroll down, you see a modern day picture of the obelisk in the ground, right? And you see this huge crack. And the mainstream narrative for why this is an unfinished obelisk is because as they were quarrying it, this crack developed in it. And then they were like, oh, we got to discard this thing because there's now a crack in it and we can't use it. Mm-hmm. Right? Which I don't think, to me, that doesn't seem logical. To me, I wonder, because you see those little drill holes on it. Right. That's a modern technique for quarrying. You drill these holes, you hammer in wedges, and it eventually breaks off a chunk. Right?
Or you fill it with TNT
and just blow it off.
Yeah.
And then you have these other cracks. To me, those other cracks seem maybe possibly not like natural. You know, maybe it is natural, but to me it doesn't seem natural. But if you can note, like going down the wall there, you know, the top surface is pretty close to flat, but that side wall has these little scoop marks and like grid lines almost on it.
Yeah, and I don't think we can really get a scope of how large this quarry is right here yet, but that's
yeah, scroll down. I think that next picture will give you a good picture.
There we go.
See, that's how large the overall quarrying of that thing is.
Look at those little people.
And look at those little people. And you know what's interesting? We were talking about this the other day. Is when you quarry down into the stone, you have to pick that stone up out of the hole to move it, right? It's different. Like today, whenever they're quarrying an edge, they're, like you said, they're blowing off chunks.
No, you work your way back. So you have a nice clean surface. That's required also. I mean, it's different for our standards today in mining safety and health. But you are working your way into that face, and that's more efficient. Like right now, it's very strange.
And they're going straight down, dude, into the quarry, or into the bedrock. You know, it's just kind of like a weird, like why. And then I was thinking about this. There is a possibility that they were planning on not lifting it out, but pulling it out forward. The only problem is it's smaller at the end than it is at the base, right? So like you'd have to carve the mouth of it bigger to be able to pull it out, you know?
Oh, for sure.
Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So how were they planning on moving this thing out of the hole?
Great question.
Right?
Yeah.
We've got a good explanation, a quote unquote good explanation as to how you would get it from here to wherever it was going, rolling it on diorite balls. But how do you get it out of the hole? You know, you'd have to lift it. And in order to lift it, I mean, we'd have to have some pretty big cranes to lift this thing today. I don't know. You probably have a little bit more of a technical understanding as to what heavy equipment you would need. But
if the weight of that, I don't even know if there's anything that we have. I'm sure there is, but I don't even know if we even have anything at this point that would lift that stone out of that hole. I mean, that is just
Well, and you know what's interesting?
massive.
What's interesting is I imagine most contractors today would say, well, let's cut it up into like chunks, and then we can move all of the chunks to wherever we're wanting to assemble this thing,
I mean, that makes sense.
and then we'll assemble it there, and it'll be the exact same function, right? Why does it have to be one solid piece?
Right.
Like that's a weird. It's one of those things. Whenever you're putting in an order for a job to be done, you have certain stipulations that you're like, hey, we can't budge on this thing, right? We can't budge. It has to be a whole piece of granite. You know, it has to be one chunk all the way across.
Right.
That's what we have to have in order for whatever we're wanting to do to be, you know, to be what it is. And it's just a weird thing. Like, and they were so confident. Who knows how many, the standard narrative would have been hundreds and hundreds of hours pounding with diorite stones, you know, thousands of slaves for hundreds and hundreds of hours. Why would you put that much effort into it if you didn't think you could pick that whole thing up?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, it's crazy.
It just doesn't make sense. And then here, scroll down to that next little thing where we have these weird marks on the surface, right? I'm not sure, 100% sure that is the unfinished obelisk, but that is in the quarry at Aswan.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just, I was just mostly wanting to pull that up to say, like, does that look like somebody was using a diorite pounding stone to quarry it, or to like do whatever they were doing to it? You know?
I mean, I think you and I have talked about it before. It looks like excavator teeth. They were in dirt, though. You know, not like that was even rock at one point.
Not
That's
in.
So strange.
Yeah. It almost looks like it solidified later, like they were doing something and then it solidified after they had done it. But it appears to be ancient granite.
Well, and what were they doing there? Is that the parts they were pulling out, and that's what was left underneath it? Because some pretty smooth cuts in there, kind of on the bottom side of that picture, and even up there where they're at. And it's almost like a scooping action up there where they're at, compared to a flat scraping down at the
so
at the bottom.
What's really interesting is I don't have any, like, this presentation was already out of control before I even stopped, you know, but this site, this particular kind of looks like there's some overlap with some of that stuff in Peru. There's some of those stoneworks in Peru kind of have this, like, they're carved into the rock, and you look at them and it's like it doesn't make any sense. It's like you can't perceive any sort of purpose. However, it almost looks like they had some sort of a purpose. Like we're looking at a microchip and not understanding what it does.
Right.
You know, it's like, what? Why would they like cut this, and why would they shape it like this? And it almost just doesn't make any sense within our present context. But so that's what I wonder is this the remnants of excavation, or were they doing something here that we don't understand today?
Right.
Like, did they shape that specifically to look like that for some reason? I don't know. But scroll down. This is kind of a cool look. So this is down in the channel of the unfinished obelisk, and kind of looking up underneath. So that guy, you can see he's standing in the bottom of that channel, and they were cutting underneath this obelisk to free it from the bedrock.
Yeah, that's wild.
And it's weird looking, right? Like, yeah. I mean, and if you were pounding with diorite stones, why would you leave these little ridges? You know? It's just like, to me, I'm kind of a proponent of the stone softening technique. Like, imagine that they were like painting on some sort of augmenting chemical that would like melt like 2 inches of the stone. And then you'd have somebody come through and like scoop that 2 inches off, but it was a progression. So almost like you can almost imagine a guy like standing with a bucket, like dipping his brush, putting it on, step into the next one, dipping his brush, step into the next one, dipping his brush, you know? And then the next guy coming behind, like scoop, bucket, scoop, bucket.
Well, I think if you took this out of context and didn't have the actual overhead picture of how large this structure really is, it does look like water could have carved that out over a long amount of time or with very high pressure. But we're also talking about granite again, and that just doesn't. That doesn't make sense either. But that's what it looks like to me, is like what you'd see on a river bottom or something like that. But, you know, if I was to, I'm just going to roll back up real quick, you know, the overhead on that. So you're talking about underneath that structure.
Yeah, so down the channel and then underneath.
Correct. So, you know, that's not,
It doesn't make sense.
No.
And it's one of those things that the standard narrative to me is just preposterous when you're looking at the object itself. And a lot of the standard narrative was generated before this thing had been dug out. You know? Like imagine you're just looking at that last little tip.
Right.
And you're saying, oh, well, the ancient Egyptians did this and they pounded it out with diorite stones. And they were planning on cutting this little chunk off, right? Just the tip of what ended up being the full obelisk. But they were just going to cut this little tip off and they were going to take it out, right? So like scroll all the way back up to that first picture, right? So homeboy, one more. Homeboy with this donkey out in the middle of the desert is the one that came up. I mean, I don't know this specific guy, but at that time period, that's the guy that came up with the modern theory that Egyptologists believe in, right? And maybe when he was looking at it and seeing this like structure, it's kind of believable that, man, maybe they had some sort of pounding stones and they had some sort of smoothing technique that they could like smooth this, you know, and maybe they were going to chop this thing up into 3 pieces and move it, right? It's kind of believable that guy maybe believed that it was diorite stones.
Well, I think it brings up another question too. For me, just looking at that picture of how deep that is, this is before they started really excavating that site. How deep that is underneath sediment or whatever that is that filled in that spot. You know, I mean, how does that even happen? That's a whole nother question and
Which
a whole other rabbit hole.
Leads to the dating of the site. It's like, man, this thing looks like it was forgotten forever.
Right, because you come back down here and look at the depth of this actual quarry. They didn't dig that out. I mean, they dug out the loose material out of there, but this got silted in somehow.
Yep, silted in that's an interesting way of saying it.
Well, I'm only saying it because, you know, Noah was floating on the boat.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
All that.
Oh, yeah.
When it got silted in.
There was definitely floods.
Anyhow, okay.
And probably
repeated
floods in this area, which Randall Carlson kind of touches on in some different, you know, things but anyway, that is a very good point, a very good perspective or observation. So anyway, my main point is this obelisk, which is in the quarry. They have all of these theories, but most of those theories operate with preconceived notions, right? Of the entire Egypt being built by the dynastic Egyptians and then being egomaniacs. Egomaniacs? Egomaniacs.
Okay.
Megalomaniacs is, I think that's the word that I was trying to go to. But, you know, it's kind of this idea that they had endless amounts of slaves. They had all the riches in the world, and that they were just building monuments to look pretty.
Right.
You know, it's just, to me, seems so unbelievable that somebody be going through this much trouble for just something that looks pretty.
I think it's totally plausible that somebody did that, but it does. There's still plenty of room for question.
No, I 100% think people did it.
Right.
I 100% think that this was not, I don't think aliens, or I'm not in that vein. I think people did this. My question is, does the standard narrative explain or conceptualize what this even is?
Right.
You know, that's kind of more of my red pill type moment for this stuff. And we are back. Thank you for staying with us and coming back. So I have quite a bit of this presentation, but I've realized that we're already at 45 minutes. So I'll probably only hit, I don't know. We'll see how far we get. We'll see. Let's just rock.
All right.
We'll rock and roll until we're ready to drop. So then my next portion, my next site to show you. So that was Aswan Quarry, and it's fascinating. You got to go check out more stuff on Aswan Quarry if you get the chance. This next portion of the presentation is over the stones at Baalbek in Lebanon. So the standard narrative of Baalbek, Lebanon, is that around the beginning of the Common Era, the Romans gained control of Baalbek and built the Temple of Jupiter on top of or around an already existing religious site, pagan religious site. The whole complex is attributed to the Romans, even though there is no direct record of them building it. The Romans no doubt occupied the site and built there. However, what is in question is what they built and if anything was there before the Romans were there.
Okay.
And so Baalbek is most well known for the 6 megalithic blocks, 3 blocks known as the trilithon, which are the largest blocks ever moved and placed, and then 3 blocks that are still in the quarry, which are the 3 of the largest stones ever quarried. So there's 3 of the largest stones ever quarried and 3 of the largest stones ever moved.
Okay.
Totaling 6 stones. So
the trithlon.
The
trilithon.
trilithon.
Okay.
So the trilithon is also called the 3 stones, and it's a group of horizontally lying giant stones that are part of the podium of the Temple of Baal at Baalbek. The location of the megalithic structure is atop a hill in the region known as Tel Baalbek. Each one of these stones is 19 meters, 62 feet long, 14 feet high, and 12 feet thick, and weighs around 750 to 800 tons each. So that's over 1.5 million pounds.
Wow.
The supporting stone layer beneath the features a number of stones which weigh an estimated 350 tons each and are 11 meters, so 36 feet wide. So what's interesting is, so in this picture, what you can see, scroll down just a little bit more, right there. So those 3 stones are the ones we're talking about, the biggest stones, right?
Right.
Well, look at the stones even underneath those, right? And they're kind of dwarfed. They're dwarfed by these huge stones. But the stones even underneath and all the way above, I mean, those are all huge stones.
For sure.
But they look small compared to these 3 massive stones. So it's interesting. The hard thing with pictures is to gain perspective. There is a channel called Wandering Wolf Productions. I've been following this dude for a long time. Like, I think I want to say I was within his first 100 subscribers, or like 200, somewhere in that range. I followed this guy a long time, and he walks around this site, and it is unbelievable to see the perspective of actually a camera moving through the site. Gives it an entirely different perspective.
I can imagine.
Of scale, and just logistical. How do you do this thing,
Right.
with such ease, it seems, and precision, All right, scroll down. Let's look at that next. Oh, wait. Go back up. Do you see the 2 dudes in the picture?
That's where I was trying to. Okay, I see them now. Wow.
So like,
I wish I could put a cursor on that, but I can't.
Yeah. So in the little V where the wall is broken in the middle there, right above the the junction.
I see them now. That gives
you the perspective, dude.
Yeah.
This thing is huge. I mean, we're talking something that is almost incomprehensibly big. Okay, scroll down for better perspective. So the three stones are highlighted in red, and you can see the people at the very bottom there.
Right.
Right. And then you can see that this is what's really cool to me about this particular set, architecturally. You've got three huge stones on top of smaller stones that are angled away from the structure on top of smaller stones.
Right.
Right? They put the biggest stones on top and built down to the smaller stones. Whereas if you look above the trilithon, you have big stones going to smaller stones. It's the exact inverse, And I think it's a flex, when very talented, knowledgeable, rich people do things that they want people to impress people, they flex on them, right?
Oh, yeah.
This is a flex. Whoever was building this structure was like, what's the biggest stone we got? Okay, I'm going to put those ones on the top, right? It's like, what? You want to put it on the top? Why don't we use them at the bottom, It's like, well, anybody can use them on the bottom. I want to put them on the top, right?
Right.
Or there was a function to having them on top, right? Maybe imagine that there was a pressure from underneath it. Well, if there's a pressure from underneath it, you want to put the heaviest stuff on the very top.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you're talking about some ground that's floating for you, you're going to make that base wider, and then put some weight to kind of hold it down, all of it down.
Because even the very bottom row of that, which are small stones, are huge.
Yeah. I mean,
in regards to, like, imagine what you typically pour like a concrete pad for a barn would be what, like 6 inches? Is that right?
I mean, yeah, you can go 4 to 6, whatever.
So, and that's anticipating a tractor maybe being parked on it, or
Right.
maybe using a car on it, right? What are you planning on parking on this thing, right? If you were talking that the smallest stones on that thing are as big as a person, seemingly. And then it's also interesting to me, like, I think that this picture also highlights the stages of construction and reconstruction, right? You can imagine, like, let's say that we had the exact spot that all of these stones sat, right? In the most original of constructions. We could probably go in and pull all of those stones except for the biggest ones, right? We could pull all of the little stones out and we could restack them in. Like, we could refurbish the site to a point, right? So my question is, all of these stones on the very top, I think all of those have, I guess my less of a question and more of a statement. To me, it seems like you can stack those and restack them and stack them again, which is probably what the Romans did. When the Romans got there, they probably said, hey, let's stack these stones up. We'll build a temple to Jupiter. They did a really good job, But then, hey, you know what happened? Friggin' society collapses. This whole site gets destroyed. And then the modern government, Lebanese government finds it and says, hey, we want to make this a tourist attraction. So how about we restack all these stones back up? And then they're claiming that this is what it looked like during the Roman times. And the Romans maybe they restacked their stones saying it looked like, hey, this is what it looked like in the Persian times, Like, where do you stop the buck as far as, like, what did the original site look like, or what purpose did it serve?
Well, it for sure looks like, to me, 2 different constructions there, and could almost be 3 or 4. Depending on how you look at it. I mean, it's definitely there's a lot of stuff.
So
do you see
to the far side of the structure, where it almost looks like a little chimney? Can you see that? Like, to me, that is clear evidence that the wall above the trilithon is different from that ending wall, because that thing looks like it was built straight up. That's why you've got a straight line in the brick.
Right.
It's weird. Like, I'd love to go to this site to actually look at it in person, because as you're looking at it, it's kind of like, imagine a series of cataclysms hitting this site, right? Knocking all the stones over. And then various levels of craftsmen find it over the ages, right?
And rebuild it.
Okay. Right? And maybe they're even inspired to build it by seeing that it was something, right? Like you're looking at these ruins and you say, nobody could ever build this. It's like, well, somebody built it, so we can build it. So we just got to figure out how to stack these stones back. And then in the process of learning how to stack the stones back, you build civilization. Because like in order to stack stones, you have to have math. You have to have physical science. You have to have engineers. You have to have craftsmen. You have to have all these series of things, right?
Right.
And you have to have a surplus of crops. You have to have water and waste disposal, and all these different markers of civilization would have to have been developed to rebuild this site. And then they probably collapsed and it fell back into disarray. So who knows what this site originally looked like. Scroll down. This is what scholars think that it probably looked like in its heyday, with the Temple of Jupiter sitting on top of it. It's just kind of a little schematic. Anyway, so that's the trilithon. Those three stones together is considered the trilithon, and that's a perfect picture too to see what I'm talking about with the stones going down. Mm-hmm. So even the standard narrative acknowledges that what is currently sitting on top of it is not what it originally looked like or what was originally there, even in the Roman times.
Right.
And my argument would be that the Romans probably stumbled across this site, this huge platform, and said, okay, let's do some Roman shit on top of it. And that's what they did, right? They built this like amazing temple. I'm sure it was beautiful. I mean, I think the Romans were a pinnacle civilization. But you look at the trilithon below and it's not the same. It's not the same thing.
Right.
To me, you know? Okay. So next we'll look at the quarried stones. We'll go pretty quick through these because they're kind of self-explanatory, and I would like the viewer to just go dig into them themselves and look at them.
Okay.
So this first picture is the stone of the pregnant woman. It is 3,000 feet from the Heliopolis temple complex. So the Temple of Jupiter, where that's all built. And it's the smallest of the three monoliths I'm about to present, and it could weigh up to 1,000 pounds. And if you scroll,
1,000 tons.
Oh, 1,000 tons. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, 1,000
pounds doesn't really do that rock, does it?
No, 1,000 tons. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So look at that thing with that woman standing on it.
Wow.
It's just unbelievable, correct? Mm-hmm. And you see the ground level, to your point about the burial.
Right.
And the sediment. Mm-hmm. Right? A lot.
Yeah.
So next we have the stone of the south. And this is also called the second monolith. And it is 1,242 tons. So this is the stone of the pregnant woman. And I'd like to point out the secondary quarrying technique on top, right? So somebody cut this whole block, and then I think whoever that society was, disappeared. And then the next society came in and settled on top of, and they said, hey, we just found this huge rock that we can build some cool stuff out of. Let's quarry it.
Right.
Right. And so then they were choosing, and this is probably the Roman era that was quarrying on top of this thing. But you can see that dude in the picture.
Yeah, on the upper right-hand side. I mean, that's just massive. And I think, you do need to at least mention, and I know we're going to shoot through these pretty quick, but that rock's already formed. There's already a lot of work done to that rock before they started pulling those rocks off of that.
You've got two parallel sides.
Right.
Why would you cut two parallel sides that long and quarry that far down? If you were trying to pull out blocks, you quarry the block, right? So like, as you can see, the 4 blocks on that far tip that are kind of clearly being cut as blocks, they fractured a tip off They quarried the 4 blocks, and then they're going to break that tip off.
Right.
Like, it kind of makes sense. Like, that's how you would do it. You wouldn't do all this other work
Right.
that you're just going to break, you know? It doesn't make sense. So you're 100% like pointing that out to even down to the bottom. Like, you can see they started going underneath this block.
Yeah, I can see that.
Which, like,
is there anything more? Is this a pretty current picture, or do you even know on it?
I actually don't know when this picture came from. I actually think that this is probably a little bit of an older picture.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because it
'Cause all
doesn't
the-
look like they've really
the tires and
excavated that
stuff.
site
Yeah.
fully yet. You know, I'd be interested to see.
Oh, this was in
What else
this was
this
in the
is-
bottom of a garbage heap
Right.
in Lebanon. Dude, imagine living in a place, right? We might live in a place. I know I get conspiratorial in a sense, or like I'm hyper skeptical about a lot of stuff. So even whenever I'm like hiking around in Texas, I'll see rock formations and I say, okay, well, that looks natural. But how do I know what natural looks like? I don't have an eye for it.
Mhm.
Right? Like, to go back to the beginning of the beginning propositions, like, I don't have an eye for natural. I just know what I've seen and been told was natural.
Right.
But this was at the bottom of a garbage heap, right? So for generations and generations, people thought, oh, that's just a garbage heap.
Hmm.
They didn't realize that there's one of the largest stones to ever be quarried is at the bottom of it. And that thousands of years ago, who knows what these people were doing?
It's just strange. Even if the rock was that way underground to begin with, that would leave a lot of questions. But just the scale of that project and why.
And it kind of makes sense
And
why,
how old
if
is that
think about it,
thing?
if the Romans were quarrying this thing, right? They came in to quarry it out and they stumble across this rock. It kind of explains why they maybe had the myths of gods.
Mm-hmm.
They might have been stumbling across these huge ass rocks and been like, okay, all right, somebody did this. Something did this. And we can't do that.
That or the giants of the Bible. You know,
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, it'd make more sense
Well,
with
the
a man
giants,
that was 10 to 12
to me,
foot tall.
it's interesting
It's a
because
little more doable.
the giants of the Bible and the Bible adjacent texts, like most of the giants are in like Enoch,
Mm-hmm.
and it talks about the Nephilim and, you know, the children of God. And most of that stuff's not canonical necessarily, but it's very analogous to the Titans of the Greek Titans and the Norse gods like Thor and Odin and all, you know, almost all of these different societies have some sort of reference to these like larger things, more powerful beings, you know, that kind of laud over us. Anyway, we can go down. We're trying, what? You got some?
No,
Okay.
no. I mean, shoot, we could run down rabbit holes left and
all
right.
day, bro.
Well, yeah.
All day, dude. It was so hard building this presentation because each of these stones I wanted to really dive in. You
Well, I
know,
think you could probably come back and do that again. I mean, this is all. I would like to learn more and hear more on each one. Then we're going to be able. There's no way we could even really touch on it today. I don't see.
not
it.
like, I mean, I would, and honestly, I don't know if I could ever really touch on it because there's so many of these different things that it's like, how do you spend enough time on each of them to actually know it? You know.
Right.
Anyway, the next stone is called the Forgotten Stone. So you know that huge stone at that very beginning picture where I showed it mostly buried, or like a portion of it was buried.
Mm-hmm.
The main reason I picked that picture was to show this picture where they started excavating around the stone of the pregnant woman. And what did they find? They found a stone quarried underneath the stone of the pregnant woman. So what the hell was happening here, dude?
Yeah, for sure.
They built steps out of the bedrock, and then they were quarrying these massive stones out of that.
Well, and then, you know, I might know this is not what it is, but at first glance, that really looks like a divider wall on a highway. Like huge.
It does.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. Well, and, you know, to the point earlier, if they were rolling the Aswan blocks from one place to the other place, it would have to look like this.
Yeah, that's more of what we're
Right?
talking about. Yeah, as far as a track and something that's smooth for it to roll on, I mean, it's going to have to
It'd
be.
have to look like this. It'd have to look like a channel that they would be pulling these stones through with ball bearings all around it.
Right, and I mean, are you digging down the solid rock the whole way to
And
make
why
that
would
smooth
and
surface?
if you have the ability to build that, why wouldn't you just figure out a better way of moving them? You know?
or why wouldn't you just build it right there at that site?
Or why wouldn't you just cut them up and move them? Because it's not going to affect the stability of the structure to move these in chunks.
No.
Once you stack them, they're so heavy
But
that
I
they're
think
not going
you're
anywhere.
right when you say that it was a flex. No matter what, regardless of what that was built for, it was a flex. Because you could easily just cut that. Still is going to work. And if you're able to cut a structure like that, I think you would be able to put it back together and make it structurally sound.
Right, like kind of like
with-
the Incan structures where you have these like
Where it
these
locks
like
in.
locked in blocks.
Correct.
Because a lot of those blocks are actually earthquake proof. They found
Right.
that whenever it shakes, they just like they just vibrate, and then after the earthquake's done, they just settle back right into the exact same slots
Right.
that they already set in. Right, so there's evidence that like why the only reason that you would do something like this is either practical. Maybe they were saying like, hey, like a mad scientist comes to you and he says, I've got this machine, and in order for this machine to operate, I need massive pressure pushing down on it, you know, because whenever I initiate this thing, it's going to push up, and I need something pushing down. Okay, well, what do you need? Well, I need massive blocks, you know, and hundreds of, or, you know, at least 6 of these things. And I want you to stack them perfect. Well, can I just chop them up into little blocks and put them there? Nope. I need them as massive blocks. It's like, it's just a weird thing. Like you're saying, if you were just trying to build a monument to yourself that the world would remember you by, you could have done it with way smaller blocks than this.
And got it done quicker.
And got it done way quicker. And so the first site that I showed you was the unfinished obelisk. And that was just to kind of show kind of a highlight of the contrast between the standard narrative and a possible explanation. Next, I wanted to show you these blocks because they're so massive and crazy in size that it's like, what were they doing? How were they moving them? Why were they doing it this way? It's just, it doesn't make perfect sense. Well, this next site that I want to show you is one of the real mind blowers. I mean, whenever I stumbled across this on the interwebs, my mind blew. It was like one of those where anything I see that comes out of India just kind of melts my brain, right? It just doesn't make sense. But the Barabar caves in India are cut into a granite fissure that's above the ground. And they date them, the standard narrative dates them to 322 to 185 BCE or BC. Some of the Ashokan inscriptions located in Makhu Dhampur region of the I can't get that one. Anyway, it's in India. Bihara,
I'm
India.
going to say Jahanabad.
Jahanabad. Ooh, I think you're right. I think that was a perfect pronunciation. And it's 15 minutes north of Gaya. Anyway, go to my website, click on this link in the website, and you can watch this video that I pulled these next images out of. It's the Megalithomania channel. Dude's awesome. It's a rabbit hole that you'll spend a lot of time on. I swear to God.
Go ahead and plug that website again while we're here.
So it's Megalithomania.
No. I'm saying your website.
Oh,
how do we get to
so
that again?
thekierleycultivation.com.
Okay.
Thekierleycultivation.com. And I'll have a link in the descriptions of wherever you're watching this.
Perfect.
So that's where these next photos were pulled from. So if you look at this first photo, that is the granite fissure that these things are cut back into. And you can kind of see the little openings, the little mouths of it. And then if you scroll down a little bit more, so this is that same granite fissure with 4 different cave entrances. I'm only showing you the ones on the far left, the 3 on the left, but there's like 12 of these caves overall.
Okay.
But these to me are the ones that are real standouts. I mean, they're just weird as hell. So this first one is the Kaharan Chopra cave. And it has an inscription on the inside of the wall of 250 BC. Scroll down just a little bit. Right there. So this, a little bit more. Look at that little 3D printing thing at the bottom. Mm-hmm. That is laser scans on the inside. So that's a computer rendering of what the cave looks like. And what I want to really highlight right off the bat is, do you see the little tunnel going into the dome?
I do.
So any machinery that you operated inside the cave had to go through that little dome.
Wow.
Right? Which is so weird to think that they placed that limitation on themselves right at the beginning. They said, we're just going to go through this little cave. Okay. Next picture. Homeboy here. This is the host of Megalithomania. .oo.uk maybe, or .co.uk. Anyway, I'll have a link in the description. That's him standing on the inside, and you see how he has reflection off the wall?
Oh, yeah.
On the inside. I mean, that is perfectly polished, and then you can really see with that light on the back how defined the lines are, right? Perfect. Mm-hmm. Scroll down. The inscriptions right here, that is what is used to date these caves. They say that the person who put the description into that wall is the same person that carved the cave. What do you think?
That looks like
graffiti
to me.
It looks like graffiti to me as well.
Yeah,
and you know what's interesting? Probably one of the most powerful men to have ever commanded in India. That's his name. And that's the best he could do.
Oh.
Which is kind of weird. You know, I don't know if he was that grand, but I mean, he at least was a king who's in history, remembered 2,000 years later. I mean, that's legit, in my opinion.
I mean, just looking at that straight edge up top, I know you got more here coming up, but yeah, that doesn't seem like a very good, unless he was down there himself, you know, trying to, put his name in there real quick.
Like just on an afternoon ride on his horse.
Yeah.
After his craftsmen left, he's like, you know what we really needed? I forgot to tell them. I want my name etched in that thing.
I mean, that did happen when I poured concrete multiple times.
Handprints, right?
Yeah. Well,
the little kid comes along.
Nail,
right.
Or whatever.
Okay, well, scroll down just a little bit. This is a picture of the inside of this cave, right? And that is a reflection of the light that they're using to record on the wall.
Wow.
That's granite. It almost looks like a mirror.
It does.
Right? I mean, it's so crazy. Scroll down. Look at this. That is the seam where the dome meets the wall. You have like a bead in the middle. Right? Like, how do you cut that? How do you cut a bead? How do you leave a bead in the middle of the seam?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a bead of silicone almost. That's wild.
Right? Like, but
that's actually rock.
That's granite stone. Yeah. That's a fissure inside the wall. And like, look at the reflection off of that. How perfectly it's polished.
Yeah, I mean, you would have to use some kind of bead medium on a sandblaster maybe these days to get that.
But then, okay,
but
on
that kind of surface, that's wild.
And how consistent it is, you know? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
Next picture is of the corner where it's a 90-degree corner, but then the roof is also meeting it at a 90-degree corner, right? And so you got this joint and it almost looks like a computer rendering of 3D space. Right? Where they meet at this specific spot. And then this next picture will blow your mind a little bit. At least it blew my mind. That's looking out of the doorway that they're evidently locked into. It almost looks like they're caged in, but But look at the ceiling, like how it is a mirror. It is
Whoa.
polished to a mirror reflection.
Yeah, I actually thought that was the sky at first. Looking at, I wasn't paying attention and saw the lines. Now you can see it. I can see it really well. And I got thrown off by what looks like graffiti again on the side.
What looks like somebody vandalized the site, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Ambielas, right? You could almost date this to two different dates of construction because you have English on it and you have ancient, I guess, Hindi.
Yeah. I don't know.
Well, I'm not exactly sure what that script would be called, but anyway. And look, one of the things that I think is really interesting to account for is, do you see to the right? You see a little reflection in the wall of their headlamp. That they didn't think to turn that light off, but they wanted to get a picture of the contrast in the light and the reflection. He didn't think to turn his headlamp off, and you caught the reflection on the wall. You know,
Yeah.
it's just crazy how highly reflective these surfaces were. Okay, scroll down. Boom, that's the 3D rendering of it. This thing was built into this wall, like this thing was built into a granite fissure in the ground,
Yeah.
and they just it looks like you 3D printed the thing, or cast it, maybe like you casted that void, right? I mean, it looks almost unbelievably perfect. And then we'll look at this next cave. This one, there's one specific thing that I'm really wanting to highlight. That's him walking through the cave. As you look at that doorway and the floor, do you notice anything different?
I mean, the floor looks kind of rough to me compared
But
to everything.
and like, look at
else.
the doorway. You remember how like shiny the other one was, and then this one. So I think that's kind of an interesting differentiation between the two caves, almost indicating a different technology or a different time frame or something,
or unfinished work.
or unfinished, which is an interesting question. So scroll down a little bit. The next thing you're going to see is just a blown up version. So this BAM, Builders of the Ancient Mysteries, that's a great channel to watch too. This guy, so this is funny. Megalithomania pulled an image from Builders of the Ancient Mysteries, and now I'm putting it into a new video. So this is like a third re-reference image, but you can see where they scanned this thing. And what I think is really cool is you see their reflection at the end of the scanning equipment, how it kind of looks like it's projected into that wall. It's because it's reflecting its laser.
Oh yeah.
Which is kind of crazy.
Right.
But scroll down and go to the next picture even. So this is the inside the first cave. And so inside the first cave, they built another cave and another hallway into another opening, right? So this is the cave within the cave. Scroll down a little bit more. This is the lip underneath the cave, that little dome thing that was coming down over the top.
Oh, okay.
See that dome that's coming down?
Kind of
it
right
goes,
there where that guy's head is.
There's an undercut. Yep, exactly where that guy's head is. There's an undercut underneath that dome with that little lip.
Wow.
Which is so what?
Why? That's a lot of work.
That's a whole, I mean, and even remember, we're in a cave, and right, we're already in a cave. We've already gone through a little doorway, little hallway, and now we're inside that thing. Now we're carving a secondary curve, and then a curve up under it, and then another 90, and then we're hitting a perfect corner, dude. Look at that corner.
Yeah, that's wild.
Underneath a lip.
Yeah, I mean, who got up underneath there and did that?
So perfectly too. Yeah. Now, granted, I'm just looking at it with my eyeballs and I'm thinking it looks perfect, but I'm pretty sure that they've done measurements on that, and it's as precise as you can imagine.
Right.
You know. Anyway, this is the next thing we'll hit real quick. Is these are the next picture is a different cave, right? This is the third cave I was going to show you. But the main reason I was wanting to show you this is because if you scroll down to that next picture, this is in a, the first one looked finished, right? It was all completely shiny. The second one was kind of not as shiny. It was cut as precisely, but it didn't have like the shine over
Right.
the whole thing. This is the third cave, and this is what the inside looks like. Right.
That almost stresses me out just looking at it.
Why?
um, man, that's a lot of scraping, and I don't know. It just it messes with my head a little bit looking at it.
Well,
Maybe
and
it's because I have brain injury, but
Scroll down just a little bit more. Maybe, yeah. Let's go back up. Actually. Up a little bit more. So look what's interesting to me, right, is these guys are carving this thing out, right? And there's obvious that you're going to use different techniques. You're not going to finish the stone with the same technique that you excavate the stone necessarily, right?
no, I'm with you on that. Yeah.
So what we're seeing is like imagine the machine is like churning, right? And you've got your like B crew in there, right? You're telling B crew, hey, you're going to stop within this certain margin, and then we're going to send A crew in afterwards, and they're going to like hit it to precision.
Right.
Right. So we've got a rough crew in that as soon as you're done on this cave, you bounce to that next cave. As soon as you're done with that cave, you bounce to that next cave.
Meanwhile, somebody's taking all of this stuff that they're coming up with and taking it out that little door through the hallway
And disposing it somewhere, right?
yeah, which is not anywhere on the site that you can see either.
I don't think so. I don't think that they found like the dumping sites of where this went. But what's interesting about these scrapes to me is, so we've already had an example of scoops, right? Now we have an example of like scrapes. And here's the hard
They're
part.
not going the same direction either.
And this is the hard part too. You got cave 1, it's finished, right?
Right.
Homeboy just comes up with his little chisel and chisels his name into it. Second one, you get to it, it's pretty close, man. Like, I almost don't want my guys coming in here and messing with this thing because it's pretty close to perfect, right? Let's leave it alone. But then you find this third cave, and it's nowhere close to perfect. It's not even finished excavating, right? So to me, like I could almost imagine homeboy that did the chiseling. Like, imagine they were excavating and then they stopped. Right?
Right.
And then civilization ebbs, right? And then civilization comes back up and they find it and they say, oh, let's try to finish out this cave, right? First civilization finished here. Second civilization pushes it to here. We now have no remnants of the first civilization's leftovers.
Right.
Because these guys scraped it all away. That's kind of what I imagine happened with some of this stuff. And then if you scroll down, you can. What time are we at?
We're easily rolling on an hour and a half.
All right, we're gonna pound out the Serapeum, and then we're gonna call it a day.
Okay, you want me to go ahead and roll down?
Yeah, scroll on down. So the stone boxes of the Serapeum. This is a big topic, and I really highly suggest you go to Uncharted X, Ben Van Kerkwyk. He did a whole series over these. It's like a 6-part series, and it will blow your mind. It's amazing. Like, what the internet was built for was like this type of, content. But the boxes of the Serapeum are a great example of how the standard archaeological narrative breaks down in both explanation of how these sites were built and who built them and why. It is believed that the Apis cult is responsible for construction of the tunnel system and the first burial boxes out of wood. And it is believed that is possibly the pharaoh Mensis around 3000 BC. So the confirmed, like the standard narrative is 5,000 years ago.
Okay.
Right? Let's go ahead and skip down. Go all the way down to that schematic. The schematic. Okay. So what they claim is that the oldest sites are at the bottom of the Serapeum.
Right.
And that as they progressed, they built back. So to the top little section, that's where the majority of the stone boxes are. And if you see at the right, there's like a little channel, a little hallway with a little box in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
That one is an abandoned box that they were taking back to the back, and then they just left it there for whatever reason.
I see it now.
So you see it. So
I gotta figure out that way I can use a pointer, or where you can use a pointer.
Oh
to
yeah,
show that. But I see where you're talking about midways through, or a quarter of the way through that hallway.
Yes, all the way to the far right side.
Correct. I got you.
And so I really probably want to go into this in a later episode into detail, but I believe that the oldest boxes are the ones that they are saying are the newest boxes, and then the newest boxes that are the boxes that they are saying are the oldest are probably the newest. It's kind of probably a reverse system. Like the ancient Egyptians found this place and they were like, hey, let's try to copy it, but we can't build these boxes, so let's just do wooden ones.
Okay.
And that's the apex bull burials. But I can't corroborate that, and I'm not a professional, so I don't really have a dog in the fight. But the next images are from the YouTube channel World of Antiquity. I have the video linked in this blog post, and it's a prime example of how confident the mainstream archaeologists are about these ancient sites and how ridiculous their claims are. So if you see here, there's a chick she's like reaching up and she's measuring the block right above her head, right? And that's one of these stone lids that they could slide on and off of these blocks, right? Scroll down. This is a picture of how they cut these blocks. This is the mainstream narrative's standard. They say that this is an explanation about how they built these blocks.
Hey, those dudes are awesome.
Yep, and their loincloths, they're just cutting these stones like perfectly parallel.
They're chilling, I mean.
Right, they're just chilling. And so scroll down a little bit more. And here's how they hollowed them out.
I mean, they look like they're chilling there too.
Yeah, you see how Homeboy's drilling straight down, and then you got Homeboy crouched down at the front, and he's smoothing it. You know?
Are they outside or inside?
It looks like they're outside there. But
okay. Oh, it got them a tent on top of it.
Yeah, a little tent above them, and they're scrubbing it, dude. They're just making it nice and smooth. This is the standard narrative about how these were used, or how these blocks were made. And then if we scroll down, this is how they moved them through the hallways. You see, you just got this little spindle.
Yeah.
You got your ropes, and you're using mechanical advantage, dude, with pulleys. That's all you have to do.
Hey, we learned about that in school.
Oh, yeah. And then scroll down a little bit more. And then this is how they got these blocks down into their little holes. They pulled it down the hall, and you could easily do this, dude. You could easily do this. You pull it down the hall with these pulleys, and then you see how you redirect your pulleys. You got your same dudes. They just pull it down the hall, and they pull it over into its spot. Keep scrolling down. And then see, once you get it into your spot, you just dig sand out. You just fill the hole with sand, and then you just dig it out. And you just drop this box straight down exactly where you want it. So go on, scroll a little bit more. See, you just put it right there. You just put it right in the spot right where you want it. This is super easy.
Easy money.
Pretty explanatory. So now scroll down. This guy, these are the. So in contrast to the standard narrative, Ben Van Kerkwijk of Uncharted X presents an alternative analysis of this in a Serapeum series he did a few years ago. I hope you will visit his YouTube channel if you want a more in-depth analysis of the video in sight. And the following pictures are pulled from his YouTube video. So this dude is named Youssef. He is like super famous in my circle of people I watch on YouTube. He's one of the guys that does a lot of the Egypt tours for a lot of these guys. And he's pointing here to this divot in one of these boxes. And you can see the light reflecting. So they polished the inside of this divot out of the box. Right? To a like hyper shine. It's beautiful. And you see on how they carved hieroglyphics on top of it.
Yeah.
Well, none of the hieroglyphics are polished. So it's like, why would you polish a surface and then carve your hieroglyphics and then repolish your surface? Like if the hieroglyphics were meant to be part of the finished product, you'd think that they would have carved the full-on hieroglyphics and then polished the whole thing.
Have you found any instances of that where the hieroglyphics are actually polished?
So yes and no. It's interesting. I'm referring back to Ben Van Kerkwijk of Uncharted X, because in this series specifically, dude, I'm telling you, I watched like 6 hours of this dude's videos in preparation for this episode.
Right.
And I can't do anything justice as to what because he's been there in person. He's taken video and pictures of this stuff, but some of the hieroglyphics are polished on the inside, and then they'll have another set of hieroglyphics right next to them that are completely different quality, you know? So that his one of his big sticks is, he says it's a tale of two technologies.
Oh.
So you have one technology arriving independently of the original technology having disappeared. It's kind of the idea. But let's scroll through real quick, finish up this episode. I advise everybody to go watch those videos. But do you see you see on that lid right there, right where we're at, how it has those chip marks all the way across that rim?
Yes.
To me, that's like they carved that edge to be pristinely perfect, right? Can you imagine how pissed you would be if you had carved that edge to be perfectly flat and somebody came along with a crowbar and chipped the shit out of it to open it up? Like, to me, it shows that they probably, whoever originally created the site, had a means by which to place the lid and remove the lid without chipping it. Because why would you be so careful to make it so perfect if you knew, hey, the first time we go to open this thing, we're going to chip it, you know? So I think like they had to have had some sort of other lift system to put these lids on and take them off to where it wouldn't damage the lid. But anyway, here's just a few more pictures of some blocks. And as you scroll down here, the next one, this is the outside of one of the blocks that one of the original archaeologists that found the site was trying to get inside the box to see if there was any treasure. And so he blew up the corner of it with dynamite and got in there. Right? He's like, dude, I can't move that lid. That shit is huge.
Yeah, let's just tear it up.
Just blow it up, dude. We got to get the gold inside. I got to get paid, son. Yeah. Okay, scroll down. You see the tunnel that they brought it through, which is wild. Underground,
the
right?
construction of that alone. So.
And then we've got another picture of the block down a little bit lower. And here it's a really clear, really easy to see the divots and where they had like taken the possibly cracks that were in it. And they were like, hey, we got to make sure this crack isn't going to cause us structural problems. So they like dig down, they divot it out, almost like you'd fix like a windshield. Mm-hmm. You know, you don't want the crack running through the whole thing, so you stop the crack in its tracks. And then if you scroll down a little bit more, you've got Yusuf, and he's walking past the abandoned block or the abandoned box in the hallway, right? And he's walking on a false floor.
Right. Okay.
So
I was gonna say it looks really smooth down
there.
there.
The block actually goes below the floor and makes contact with the actual floor.
Okay.
So it's a huge block. Here, if you scroll down to that next picture, that's Ben Van Kerkwyk, and he's showing how they cut modern granite, how they modern drill would cut granite.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And that's how they would
diamond blade
hit the precision that is shown in these artifacts. And then if you scroll down a little bit more, this is how they polish it. This is how they polish countertops and stuff. Big industrial polisher. Right. And then if you scroll down to that next one, so this is a 3D rendering of that block, of one of those blocks with a person next to it, and the lid sitting kind of askew on it. And you can plug it into the computer, and it renders it as 90-degree angles, because that's how accurate the actual object is.
Right.
Which is crazy. And then if you scroll down, this dude is David Dunn, or not David Dunn. He's one of my favorite human beings, but this is Christopher Dunn. And he is like, he's written a bunch of books. He wrote the Giza Power Plant book, and he's an engineer. And this is him holding a square on the inside of the dynamited box.
Oh, yeah, okay. I see. Yeah, he's sitting inside the hole.
He's sitting inside the hole, and it's perfect.
What's shiny inside there too?
Reflecting
needs to be noted.
Yeah, reflecting off the top of it and his hat. You can see all that reflected. but it's essentially the lid fits with the inside of the block perfectly at a 90-degree angle. To as perfect as his 14-inch blade precision square could measure.
Well, and I know we're just trying to get through this today. I think shoot, we're probably almost an hour and 45 minutes now, which is fine for me. But, I mean, to go back on another episode and discuss why it was important for that to be as finished on the inside as it is on the outside. It was obviously very important.
Why do you need it to be shiny? Why do you need to be shiny on the inside of a burial box?
These were important. Whatever they were for, whatever they used them for, there was a lot of time spent to make each one of these, obviously.
And so precise. I mean, it's like you can't pay somebody to be that precise.
No, and
the only way somebody's that precise is if they're an artist, in my opinion, or like some sort of a technical just master. Right? Like, that's the only reason to be that precise.
When I've had a lot of conversations about modern construction and, nobody really wants to pay the amount. This is still possible and even more possible today. It's hard to imagine somebody doing it thousands of years ago to that precision. But most people don't want to pay the cost of what it would cost to do that these days. I mean, there's just...
Oh, you want to know what the cost of doing that today would be?
Yeah, sure. Do you actually know?
So Christopher Dunn wrote a letter to True Stone, which was one of the largest quarrying companies. Here, you can go and scroll down. I've got a clip of it. One more. So he wrote it, and he said, Mr. Leather goes on to say that True Stone, which is the company he wrote, did not have the equipment to create this box.
Oh, wow.
And that they would have to create it in 5 pieces and then ship it to its destination and then bolt it together on site.
Well, there you go.
So scroll down a little bit more. So this is a letter that Homeboy sent. Right there. So this is a letter that Homeboy sent to Christopher Dunn, and it says, this is all in that in Ben Van Kerkwick's video, but it says, first, I would like to thank you for providing me with this fascinating information. Most people never get the opportunity to take part in something like this. You mentioned to me that the box was derived from one solid piece of granite, a piece of granite that is the size estimated to weigh 200,000 pounds of Sierra white granite, which was approximately 175 per square foot. If a piece that size was available, the cost would be enormous. Just the raw piece of rock would cost somewhere in the area of 115 million or 1 million. What would that be?
I think that says
115,000, which that seems doable.
Oh, yeah.
And this piece does not include cutting the block to size or any freight charges. The obvious problem would be in transportation, and there would be a specific permit issued by the DOT that would cost thousands of dollars. And so from the information that I gathered from your facts, the Egyptians moved this piece of granite nearly 500 miles. That is an incredible achievement for society that existed hundreds of years ago.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, probably by the time you finish the craftsmanship, everything that they had to do that 115,000 would end up being well over $250,000, or if not more. Which, I mean, that's doesn't really matter because it was done so long ago, but I was kind of curious. So it's kind of cool you had that.
that
number there.
Well, and that's what I'm saying is these guys, this world. That's why I'm really excited to go to the Cosmic Summit, because this alternative history space is really, really tight.
Right.
Like Ben Van Kerkwick of Uncharted X and the Snake Brothers from the Snake Brothers podcast, the Serpent Brothers podcast, I think. Yeah, anyway, I'll put a link to all these. And all of these guys, they go deep. They're not looking to prove themselves right so much as find what it is that they even think. So it's super. It's one of those things where people like always call bullshit on me anytime I start saying something, or I start saying like, oh, no, this doesn't make sense. The standard narrative has got to be wrong. And they're like, oh, whatever. What? Because you saw it on a YouTube video, and then I was like, oh yeah, well it was a YouTube video, but it was 10 hours long.
Right.
And this guy has actual video from the site with a dude who's grown up like third generation Egyptian, you know.
And I do think, I mean, I mention it almost every time. We do have different belief systems a little bit on this, but there's no denying that we are looking at things that were built, and there is definitely a gap in the narrative that's so far to this point not really been covered or
Acknowledged.
really acknowledged. So it's fairly kind of new science trying to figure out even what we're looking at. I know these guys have been working on this for a long time. You've been working on this. You got a lot of time wrapped up in it as well. Obviously, there's probably hundreds of years, I would say, at this point, right, with these families and some of these guys that have been unearthing these sites. But there's still no real definitive answers on what it is, and we may not ever.
And what's crazy is that they're still finding new stuff.
Right.
They're still finding new stuff like Göbekli Tepe and the entire Tepe complex and Carrion Tepe and all these new sites. I mean, they're like blown away. Like they're finding new stuff every single day. And for them to consider the narrative closed or the perspective understood whenever there's so many new discoveries, right? Like it blows my mind that you would have a preconceived notion as to something being correct or incorrect before you have all the information.
Right.
And now we're finding new stuff that we're far from having all the information. So anyway, I guess in conclusion for this podcast, I wanted to present some of this stuff because it's almost like, like whenever you're in court and you only have to prove that somebody is innocent beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
Right? It's like you have to prove that I could see a scenario in which this person was innocent. Right? To me, I feel like that's what I'm trying to do with the standard narrative is like, obviously it's wrong.
Right.
And all I have to do is prove within, a reasonable doubt that they're wrong. And the whole case falls apart. Right? And it's interesting because I do feel like so much of our view of humanity and our view of human nature and our view of how inconsequential our existence on this planet is pivotal on the understanding that we're egomaniacs or that we're hyper focused on mythology and religious fervor that, in my opinion, it diminishes what these people were probably actually doing. Like if we rolled across a concrete plant, or let's say people 1,000 years from now, they roll across a concrete plant and they're like, this was a temple to their rock god. They had a rock god. And they built all this stuff and they built all this whole thing to honor their rock god. When in reality, it's like, no, it was an asphalt plant to make roads so people could go to school, right? It's like one of those things that would diminish the overall fact of what the thing is. Like even today, I mean, everything is more dependent upon our economic structure than anything else. Like our present day, like you see it all the time or have been exposed to it, sadly, through the insurance agency. If it doesn't pay, it don't stay. Right?
Right.
Like if you cannot pay, you do not get the product. Right? We operate in this capitalistic constraint that relies on an abstract thing for people to get what they need.
Right.
And it's just like, to me, it diminishes what these people were doing to say that what they were merely doing was just playing with ones and zeros and they were balancing spreadsheets. They were doing something more, just the same way that we're doing something more, right? People like to diminish us as kind of like a virus. I've heard people say that humanity is a virus, or that humanity is overall destructive, or that humanity makes the world a worse place and is destroying, and all we do is destroy the planet, right? That is a narrative. We're global warming, we're destroying everything. But that doesn't take into account any of the beautiful things that humanity does. Like, for instance, having a helicopter that whenever somebody's having a stroke, you can snatch them up out of a field, take them to a hospital. A doctor can stick a little freaking wire up into their brain, pull that shit out, and save their brain. Right? That's beautiful, right? But if you just reduce it all to we're a humanity's a virus, right? It diminishes the overall beauty, in my opinion, to say that these sites were literally just the result of rich dudes doing rich shit.
Right.
You know? Instead of it's like, no, like maybe, like for instance, an oil refinery. Although there are a lot of moral conundrums around the oil refinery, it also shows that there is there's a practical purpose for the refinery.
Right.
So you can make the sacrifice as a society for the production of the facility. Anyway, we'll wrap it up. That was a long episode. I'll probably cut it up into 2 pieces, but I'm excited about the Cosmic Summit coming up. Be sure to double check on my website, follow up, and leave a comment, leave a thought, ask a question, tell me where to go next. Check out the Broken Road Project and the Broken Road Podcast. And hopefully you enjoyed this episode and you will join us next time. So until next time, peace out.